I wanted her to be proud of the person I would become, worried or her legacy to be that.
They say some memories are too powerful to stay hidden. Prince William stumbled upon footage so personal, it left him visibly shaken. What was in it? And why has it been kept secret for decades? Watch till the end, and don't forget to subscribe for more royal revelations. The day started in the most ordinary way. Prince William had arrived early at the Royal Archives, a place he'd been visiting regularly over the past few months. The project he was helping with wasn't glamorous. It was quiet, meticulous work that required patience. Inside the archive room, the air felt cool and still. Long shelves stretched from wall to wall, packed with boxes, binders, and carefully labeled containers. Some were covered in a fine layer of dust, a sign they hadn't been touched in decades. A small team of archivists was already there, heads bent over tables, gently sorting through photographs and transferring old tapes into digital formats. For William, this was partly about duty. Preserving family history mattered, not just for the royal record, but for the next generation. He wanted to make sure nothing important was lost to time. On most days, the process was predictable. Open a box, scan the contents, make a note, and pass it along. But that morning, something unusual happened. One of the archivists called him over, holding a small disc between their fingers. It didn't have a label, no date, no markings of any kind. Unlike the carefully cataloged items around it, this one looked like it had simply been slipped into a case and forgotten. It had been buried at the very bottom of a box filled with mismatched items. Old VHS tapes, some DVDs, and faded envelopes of photographs. William took it, turning it over in his hands. The surface caught the light, but it offered no clues. He asked where it had been found. The answer was vague. Somewhere in one of the older family storage boxes.
Something so traumatic as the death of your mother when you're 15, as very sadly many people.
He could have set it aside for later, but something about the mystery tugged at him. With a small shrug, he decided to play it right away. A technician slid the disc into a player. The machine whirred softly, the screen flickered, and for a brief moment, static filled the room. No one spoke. They all leaned slightly closer, waiting to see what would appear, and then a grainy image began to take shape. The static slowly cleared, revealing soft daylight and the blurred outline of a garden. At first, the scene was shaky, as though the person filming was adjusting their grip on the camera. Then the focus sharpened. There she was, Diana. Her expression full of life, her smile as bright as the afternoon sun. She was barefoot on the grass, moving with an ease and joy that felt almost out of place in the stillness of the archive room. In her arms was a toddler, tiny, giggling, full of energy. It was Harry. The camera followed as she set him down and playfully chased him across the lawn. Her laughter carried through the small speakers, light and genuine, the kind of sound that makes you smile without thinking. Harry's giggles overlapped hers, the two of them caught up in a game only they seemed to understand. William didn't move. He hadn't seen this before. Not in documentaries, not in any family viewing. This wasn't part of the public record. This was different. He noticed details instantly. The way the sunlight caught the edge of Diana's hair, the way she crouched down so she could be at Harry's eye level, the way her hands instinctively reached for him even when he darted away. Something about the footage felt untouched, almost secret. It hadn't been polished or prepared for anyone to see. It was simply life, captured exactly as it was in that moment. William's gaze stayed locked on the screen. Around him, the others worked quietly, but he barely noticed. He was no longer in the archive room. In his mind, he was back in that garden, hearing the rustle of grass under small feet, feeling the same warmth in the air. The scene shifted again. Diana scooped Harry into her arms and spun him gently. His laughter peaked, high and bright. She hugged him close, leaning in to whisper something in his ear. Even though the words were inaudible, the tenderness in the moment was unmistakable. William leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on the table, as if moving closer to the screen might somehow pull him inside that memory. William's eyes stayed fixed on the screen. The world around him seemed to fade. The quiet shuffle of papers, the muted hum of machines, all replaced by the simple rhythm of Diana's laughter and Harry's tiny footsteps. When the clip ended, he didn't move. His hand hovered near the controls, and without a second thought, he pressed play again. This time, he watched differently. His focus shifted from the broader scene to the smallest details. The way Diana's eyes followed Harry wherever he ran. How she'd pause mid-chase just to take him in, smiling softly before reaching out again. The way her fingers brushed the hair from his forehead before pulling him close. With every repeat, something in his chest tightened. It wasn't just a wave of nostalgia. It was heavier than that, For years, he'd kept certain feelings sealed away, packed neatly in a place where they couldn't slow him down. But now, here they were, spilling over. His breathing grew slower, deeper. He could almost feel the air from that day, the kind of gentle breeze that carries the smell of fresh-cut grass. He could almost hear the way Harry's shoes scuffed the ground when he ran. It wasn't only about missing the moment, it was about realizing how rare it was, how fleeting, and how much had changed since then. William leaned back in his chair, but his eyes never left the screen. He played the clip a third time, this time letting each frame settle in his mind. The longer he watched, the more it felt like the footage was trying to tell him something personal, something he wasn't ready to hear, but couldn't turn away from either. When the video stopped for the fourth time, William let his hands fall into his lap. He stared at the black screen, the faint reflection of his own face looking back at him. He knew instantly that this wasn't just another family memory to be filed away. It was different, almost as if it had been waiting for him. The thought made him pause. Why now? Why here? He thought about the years that had passed, about all the moments that had slipped quietly between him and Harry. They had grown up in the same world, shared the same childhood, but had taken such different paths. Time, distance, and choices had built walls where there had once been no need for them. Watching this clip was like finding a crack in that wall. The image of Diana with Harry wasn't just warm or comforting. It was sharp. It reminded him of the bond they once had, a bond built in those little, ordinary days when laughter came easily. He pressed his fingertips lightly against the table, as if grounding himself in the present, because part of him wanted to stay in that memory forever. Another part knew he couldn't. There was a strange clarity in the moment, the kind that doesn't come from thinking things through, but from feeling them fully. He realized this footage wasn't just showing him the past, it was holding up a mirror to the present, and the reflection. It made him wonder if it wasn't too late to change a few things. That evening, William carried the moment home with him. The images played in his mind over and over, like a song you can't quite stop humming. Kate was in the living room when he walked in, surrounded by papers and her own to-do list. She looked up, ready to greet him, but paused when she saw his face. There was a softness in his eyes, mixed with something she couldn't quite name. He didn't explain right away. Instead, he set his bag down, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a small flash drive. Without a word, he plugged it into the laptop on the coffee table and pressed play. The screen lit up with that same garden scene, Diana chasing a laughing Harry through the grass. Kate leaned in, resting her hand gently on his. She didn't ask questions. She just watched. William's gaze never left the screen. He wanted her to see what he had seen, not just the images, but the feeling behind them, the unspoken warmth, the ease, the love that didn't need any explanation. When the clip ended, Kate stayed quiet for a moment. Then she looked at him, as if to say she understood without needing words. He finally spoke, telling her where the video had been found and how it had stopped him in his tracks. She listened without interrupting, letting him untangle his thoughts in his own time. By the end of the conversation, nothing had been solved, but something had shifted. William no longer felt like he was carrying the weight of that discovery alone. The next day, William couldn't shake the feeling that the video wasn't something to keep to himself. It wasn't just his memory. It belonged to the people who had truly known her. He began making a few quiet calls, speaking only to close family members. There was no formal announcement, no official gathering, just a gentle invitation to meet in one of the palace's private rooms. That afternoon, the group arrived. The chairs were arranged in a small semicircle, a projector set up in front. The lights dimmed, and the soft click of the remote filled the silence. The footage began to play. Diana's laughter floated through the speakers, followed by Harry's tiny giggles. For a few minutes, the room felt lighter, as if the years between then and now had simply melted away. Some family members smiled faintly, others blinked rapidly, holding back emotion. A few sat perfectly still, their eyes fixed on the screen. No one spoke. No one needed to. When the clip ended, the room stayed quiet. It was the kind of silence that doesn't demand to be broken. A shared moment where everyone understood exactly what they had just experienced. Slowly, conversations began to form. Memories spilled out. Stories about small things she used to say, the way she lit up a room, the little gestures that made her feel present even now. For William, it wasn't just about sharing the video. It was about seeing the way it drew people closer together, even for a short while. That night, after everyone had gone, William found himself alone again. The echo of laughter from the video still seemed to hang in the air, almost as if the room remembered it too. He sat in a quiet corner, the image of Diana with Harry looping in his mind. At first, it brought warmth, but as the minutes passed, something heavier settled in. A familiar feeling he had learned to keep at a distance. He thought about how life had moved on since those days, about the early years when he felt it was his job to watch over Harry, to be the steady one. Somewhere along the way, that closeness had thinned. Little by little, they had drifted, not in one big moment, but in hundreds of small ones. The guilt crept in quietly, without asking permission. He found himself wondering if he could have done more, spoken up sooner, reached out more often, held on a little tighter before the distance set in. The video hadn't just shown him a piece of the past, it had shown him what they'd let slip away. And now, sitting there in the stillness, he couldn't ignore it anymore. Over the next few days, the thought wouldn't leave him alone. Every time the memory of the video surfaced, so did the image of Harry. Not the small boy in the garden, but the man he'd grown into. And with that image came the same question. Was it too late to bridge the gap? William picked up his phone more than once, typing out a message only to erase it. He didn't want to make it sound like a formal request, but he also didn't want it to feel overly sentimental. Eventually, he kept it simple. A short note mentioning that he had come across something personal, something about their mother, and that he'd like to talk. When he finally pressed send, the waiting began. Hours passed slowly. He tried to focus on other things, but his mind kept circling back to the unread message. Late in the afternoon, his phone buzzed. Harry had replied. The words were brief, but they opened a door. They could talk later in the week, not in person, but over a video call. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. And for William, that was enough to move forward. When the day came, William chose one of the quieter rooms in the house. A small desk, a single chair, and the soft light from a nearby window. No distractions. He opened his laptop and waited for the call to connect. When Harry's face appeared on the screen, there was a pause. Both of them smiled faintly, the kind of smile that says, "I'm not sure where to start." William decided to go straight to the point. He told Harry about the video. The garden, the laughter, the way their mother had scooped him up and whispered in his ear. He described how it had made him feel, how it had stirred memories he hadn't touched in years. Harry listened without interrupting. When William finished, there was another pause before Harry spoke. He said he remembered that day too, that it had been one of those carefree afternoons where nothing else mattered. William nodded, then admitted that watching it had reminded him of how close they once were, and how far apart they drifted. He didn't blame anyone. He didn't rehash old arguments. He just said he missed having his brother close. It wasn't a dramatic exchange. There were no grand speeches or instant fixes, but they stayed on the call longer than they had in a long time, talking about their mother, about small moments from the past, and about life now. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. In the days that followed, there were no sweeping gestures, no sudden reunions, but something had shifted. William and Harry began exchanging short messages now and then. A quick check-in, a small update, a simple photo that didn't need much explanation. Some weeks passed without much contact, but the silence no longer felt like a wall. A few days after their call, William sent Harry the video. He told him to watch it when he was ready. When Harry finally replied, the message was short. He said it had been difficult to watch, but also beautiful. Those few words were enough for William to know the clip had reached him in the same way it had reached himself. Neither tried to push things too far, too fast. They didn't pretend the past years hadn't happened. But there was a new sense of space between them. Not empty space, but room to build something again, slowly. It was quiet progress, but progress all the same. The video had done more than stir emotions. It had reminded William of a responsibility he'd been carrying quietly for years. He didn't want moments like the one he'd just witnessed to stay hidden in dusty boxes. Over the following weeks, he began going through more of the stored materials. Old photographs, handwritten notes, home videos. Each item felt like a piece of a larger puzzle. He handled them with care, setting aside anything that captured the warmth and personality that defined his mother. He reached out to a few people who had worked closely with her in the past. Some shared stories he had never heard. Small human moments that revealed her kindness, her patience, and the way she made people feel truly seen. The more he heard, the more he realized how important it was to keep that spirit alive. Not just for himself and Harry, but for their children and the generations who had only ever known her through headlines or photographs. William started considering a more permanent way to share her legacy. Not a grand impersonal museum, but a space that reflected who she really was. Somewhere people could connect with her story, feel her warmth, and understand the values she lived by. It was early days, but the idea had taken root, and with it came a sense of purpose that felt both familiar and new. In title, a short segment of the video was included in a documentary about Diana's life. It wasn't a decision William made lightly, but he felt the clip showed something the public rarely saw. Not the public figure, but the mother in her element. The footage was brief, just a few moments of her laughing and chasing a small Harry through the grass, but it carried a warmth that was hard to put into words. When the documentary aired, the reaction was almost immediate. Messages poured in from people who said it had brought back their own memories, not just of Diana, but of their own families, their own moments of joy. Some said it made them feel closer to her again, even after so many years. What struck William most was the tone of the responses. People weren't just talking about the past, they were reflecting on what it meant in the present, the importance of connection, of making time for the people you care about. The conversation had shifted. For a while, it wasn't about royal duties, public appearances, or differences. It was about shared humanity. The wave of responses didn't fade quickly. Weeks after the documentary aired, William was still hearing from people who'd been moved by the clip. Some shared personal stories, others simply said thank you. When he stepped out to meet the public, the conversations felt different. People spoke with a softer tone, not about formal duties, but about family, about memories, about moments that had shaped their own lives. It was a subtle change, but a meaningful one. He realized that this was what people had connected to, not a title or a role, but the simple truth of someone loving and being loved. For William, it became a quiet reminder of what mattered most. The work he did, the causes he supported, they all meant more when rooted in the same values his mother had lived by: empathy, kindness, and presence. The video had started as a personal discovery, but now it was shaping the way he saw his place in the world. Looking back, it was strange to think that such a small, unmarked disc had set so much in motion. What began as an ordinary day in the archives had turned into a chain of moments that reconnected people, stirred old bonds, and breathed new life into a legacy. For William, the footage wasn't just a window into the past. It was a reminder that some connections never really disappear. They may fade, they may grow quiet, but given the right spark, they can come alive again. It had nudged him to reach out, to speak openly, and to see the value in small steps toward healing. It had shown him that preserving his mother's memory wasn't just about keeping her story safe. It was about carrying it forward. And perhaps most importantly, it has proven something that's easy to forget. The smallest moments often leave the biggest mark. So maybe the real question isn't what the footage revealed, but what it made possible. What about you? Has a memory, a photo, or even a simple conversation ever pushed you to reconnect with someone? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story moved you, stick around for our next video. There's more to this journey than what you've seen today.